All right, so here we're starting, the April-May turn, and I started rolling through the winds, blowing them around. I'm not going to show you all the effects of that, but I came up across one that I played and realized it brings into question my interpretation of the rules. We had a east-southeast wind, goes from Kiel to Kolberg, inclusive. All locations have equal chance. Well, both Kiel and Kolberg are port locations, which, when I played at Solitaire, I incorporated those in and rolled, including them. But here I decided, and late in the Solitaire game, I decided, hey, that's not allowed because they can't actually be in those spaces. They can only be in places with the red circle, if that's a red wind or the yellow or the blue or whatever. But then first of all, that state's inclusive. Oops. Knocked some counters around looking for my a place to keep the rules while I'm looking. But then I look and I'm getting a northwest here, and this is adjacent to the Norwegian coast. Spaces adjacent to and south of Oslo inclusive. Clarification: Oslo is excluded. I mean, it almost feels like these ports should be included. And you know, given that it doesn't really work properly, the gales have a radius 0 effect with an inordinary. Well, you can't be in an inordinary at radius 0 unless you're in a port, so you can't be out at sea with them, and none of the ports have the color circles, so who knows, you know. Whatever. Anyway, I'll blow those around, and this turn nothing's going to happen, it looks like. Okay, and we push on. We've made it through June, July, into July, August. A little bit of storms moving around. A couple of random events have kicked up on the weather table. When you roll a 9 on weather, you have to roll on this random events table. Most of them don't do anything. Basically, actually none of them do without ships out. Basically, you could do some quick damage to the ships that are already out and ready. You could also generate fog over here in the gray spaces. Those, I guess, are these spaces that are filled in. Maybe not. Maybe the darker ones. Again, not really clarified well in the rules, but that seems to make sense that you'd have fog arising out here and then also in this range. But these look gray to me too, and that's all the spaces if you take that into account. So I don't know, like with the terrain over here on a lesser wrath, you kind of have to guess, and you might change your mind as you're going through the game whether or not something's actually gray, because there are differentiations in the color. You'll see, for example, this looks fairly light. Maybe it's just a trick of the visual. These are definitely darker, but it's hard for me to tell. Are those are obviously not this dark, but are they as light as these? I don't know. But it says gray spaces, and those are the only ones I can see as gray. You could also look at these with these little asterisks. What do they say they mean? Well, that's this says coastal. That's a SW line. That's a wind indication. So I'm not sure what that gray is because it's in the same place as these. So maybe that's meant to indicate the fog. Again, not clarified in the rules. I might change my mind as I go through. Yeah, fog shows up in one place sometimes and in others. Hard to tell. I think since I have no idea what this is for, and these dark spaces seem to always be in the channels, I'm guessing that that's the fog spaces. So we'll go with that. All right. Well, we've also seen a little bit of repairing. And nothing's in a shape where it can go to sea. So these guys are at like 18 damage each. Here we're at 15. Out here we're down to 8 in Archangel, but that's hard to get out of. The Swedish galleys are actually getting close to being able to sail out and maybe do something. I would really like to get this one repaired a little bit, be able to send 2 out, but I can just send 1 ship out, 1 squadron out as a tiny formation. In fact, if you look at the leaders, the second number is their ability to command, and galleys If you make a galley fleet, it can only be in a detachment. Nothing else has galley formation ability. So I guess what that means is I'll be using a Commodore for those, and a Commodore is likely not to be able to command more than one squadron without a penalty. We haven't seen, well, this was a quarterly turn here, so he's had another roll on the Reichstag table, and nothing changed there. It's still a balanced view. That does not affect the chance of a war, which is kind of weird because the hats are the ones who really drove the war, not the caps. So if the caps were in charge, you'd almost think the war wouldn't even happen. The game would be quite boring, though, if the war never happens. You might ask why I'm playing this part out. It's to get these repair values down so that I can actually use my ships in the first turn. But it does take into account, and I could exclude this and just say, I'm just going to do some repairs while the war's not on and forget about the wind rolls. But by doing them, there's some possibility of, say, a wind rolling over Stockholm, for example, or St. Petersburg, and being able to damage the fleets there, which would be some significant effect. Nothing, of course, going on over here until the war starts. Okay, so here we are in the July-August turn, and, well, I rolled that 2, which means the war starts. That's the Summer Scrala war determination rolls. Over on this map, it's actually, I think, a 0 to 3 or 0 to 4, but the game starts at a defined point. Oh, I think over here, the July-August turn, so actually there's a fair chance that the game might start later than it should. And, well, anyway, what it means is the Russian army does not have orders, so they normally start the game over here in kind of this advanced position where they can take actions where the Swedes can't. Now that may be a little ahistorical because they're able to grab, what is this, Williamstrand or whatever, fairly early. They've got a lot of troops at Vyborg, and the Swedes can't even move before the Russians can move up and lay siege and conceivably take it. That's actually ahistorical, but that's what I saw happening in my game of it. If the Russians want to push their luck and charge against the attrition by moving 3 full hexes, which is an expensive move. All right, so we're in a position where I don't really know what I'm doing. No big shock there. So what we'll do is we move into the first thing over somewhere in this chart. First thing we have is this random events phase here. So we gotta roll it, and, well, I'll make the brown die my tens digit. I'll be rolling here on this random events chart. Let's see if I can find a place to roll. I get a 38, which is no event. You can see there's a good number of no events. So now we're going to determine the initiative, which is really quite a simple thing. That's over for the ALW map. What we do is we add up the total number of CPs in place. Now, this is a weird situation. I'm going to give the Russians a full 5 CPs and take this marker off. Let them actually define when and how they want to do operations and give them those full points rather than stick them with the starting situation in ALW, which says, hey, you've already decided you're going to spend 3 on that. It may be better to spend more for a longer continued operation. The problem with spending more is that if your operation is over quickly, let's say you launch for Vyborg or for Wilhelmstrand or whatever, you end up wasting points that you could use on a follow-up move. So maybe 2 or 3 is right. You can always start another campaign, but you're going to pay a prestige point for failing campaigns. It may be better to gain prestige on a sure thing, because prestige is what you're aiming for. You don't want to take those failures. A hard decision you got to make there. Okay, but it's not the time for that yet. What it is time for is determining the weather. Okay. Now we're going to take care of these over here because in the impulses here, you know, honestly, nothing's going to change over on the sea table. I don't have any ships available. I'm going to be rolling for convoys to appear to support the land operations, but that doesn't happen right away. That happens in the administrative phase. So right now there's nothing happening over here, and honestly there's nothing happening over here either except for some of these die rolls. So next turn is the big turn where stuff starts. But I do want to show you some of this stuff here. So we determine the weather for this turn. And what do we get here? Well, we're in the June-July turn, and that means we're in turn 9 here. So we make a quick roll on that table. 1. We get dry weather, which is normal. Okay. Now that says it's initial weather. I don't remember weather changing. Ah, yes. So it is possible for a player to say, I don't like the weather. I want it re-rolled. And the way you do that is you spend an operations point and you force a re-roll. That actually... The expenditure of the operations point is to kind of indicate that you're waiting for the weather to change to take your actions. Nobody's doing that. Nobody cares about the weather this turn. They can't do anything whatsoever. So they're fine with that right now. The war snuck up on us here. Okay. Now we're going to go to the operational impulses. Again, nothing's going to happen here basically because nobody's got an active campaign, so they can't do anything. The same is true over on the seaside, so I'm going to roll up my wind, see what happens, do my repairs and stuff, and then I'll come back and do whatever administrative stuff has to be done over on the ALW map. I realized I was out of sync. We're actually in the July-August turn over here. Oh, that's... I hope. That's where we are here. So I've got to keep them in sync. I thought I was on the other one, but I'm not. So the weather was a different table. No chance of wet on a 0. Less of a chance of dry, more of a chance of hot. But we ended up with that 1 roll, which means we're going to get the dry weather no matter what. So no extreme heat. Not that it matters because nothing's happening this. Okay, now I do want to handle something from the administrative phase here. In particular, I'm worried not about any of these. Oh, negotiation. That may be... I don't have a little quarterly marker there. That may not be quarterly. I thought it was. Yeah, that's supposed to be quarterly. I should have a little Q there. I'll put it there. But during reinforcement and reorganization, we're going to do something we haven't done before, which is the reinforcement request table. Now, both players get to roll on this, but here's what's kind of interesting. For the Swedes, we have no modifiers here because this is not closer to Stockholm. So they're going to be rolling straight up, and we'll just do them. Okay, 6, they don't get any ships. This is important. Now, one important thing to note about this is that the orders step came before this, which meant even if I got a ship, I couldn't sail it. Well, I couldn't immediately assign it orders this turn or anything, and I couldn't draw orders for it. That's not too big a deal because I can still form a formation on the board using one of these things and put it out to sea and say, okay, well, next turn I'll assign it its orders. It's, you know, got this fitting out turn. Actually, it's not a full turn to fit out, so it would delay things by a little bit. Okay, now for the Muscovites, it's a little different. First of all, they have a penalty for the year. It gets better as it goes on. But they also have this option to call a draft. Now, what happens if you get a draft? If you also have the option to spend a prestige and get a unit. That might be worthwhile because you'll get to sail early. I know you can't drop it to the best level there that way. I think that's the restriction. Anyway, because I can't do anything, it might be worth doing, but I'm not going to do it this turn. I might do it some other turn. But for the Muscovites, they can declare this draft. Now, what the draft does, though, well, what it does in the Summer Scroll is it serves as a penalty on here, which is no big deal because you don't particularly want Lacey's campaign to work well. How does it work in the integrated rules, though? don't see a specific change there. I'll have to look more carefully, but at this point, I don't know if there's a penalty to the draft. There's gotta be. It's gotta cut into your reinforcements or something. So I'm not gonna do it this turn. Like with the Swedes, I'm just gonna roll. Now I have a penalty of +1 on the table, so I'm even less likely to get anything. And I do not. So we'll pass that by here. And now I go to kind of the normal sequence that I've been going through, which is to worry about conducting the repairs. And we'll be on the land map. There is another option. Obviously, I can still call on Archangel, but those ships are pretty damaged. But there's a chance of a convoy beginning to form. Now, for the Muscovites, it's a support convoy, and I think it uses the same table as the troop convoy. For the Swedes, it's a troop convoy, which doesn't work that way. It works if the Swedes get reinforcements, and we'll discuss that if they get reinforcements over here. Now, this is where the points of integration get kind of tough, because I like to handle one map and go to the next. Well, I may have to back things up to take care of, hey, I knew this ahead of time. I'm not going to be able to create an escort or anything like that, though, for it. All right, so let's roll for convoy. The only one I'm worried about is the Russian support convoy, I think. Let me check the rules on that. That is, 2.353. And without putting those marks in place, I would be unable to do this. Support convoys function in the same manner. The convoy destination is determined by the chit. Once it's arrived, it begins. Okay. So as far as I can see, they form under the same rules as the non-support convoys. So I get to roll for these. I don't know if there's a Swedish support convoy. I don't think so. No, all they have is a troop convoy here. They can support with their galley fleets, but they don't have a specific support convoy. So I worry about the Muscovites. Will they form one? No, they're not forming it this turn. Okay, so there I'm at the point where I thought I was, and I can go over to the repairs and the land. So I got myself leaving a piece off the map. I left a Russian depot. That's absolutely vital. I was going to have to buy it otherwise, because you can't really siege things unless you're within 4 spaces of a depot. Anyway, so that had to be there. Now I'm going to handle the administrative side of the land map. I looked up the draft rules. I cannot find a single thing about linking the draft over here, which is a fairly major effect. So I'm going to just house rule this sucker and say that the Russians remove a full regiment, essentially 2 strength points from the board in order to man the ships. Less than that wouldn't feel like it would have anywhere near the effect that a draft does here. A draft here actually provides a +1 on the table here. So it's got to be something that causes pain to the infantry. Now the question is, who decides? Because theoretically this is supposed to be played by 4 players, 2 on each map, a Swede on each map and a Russian on each map, and presumably maybe some Danes. I gotta cut this video. All right, so what I think is with say removing a unit, or worse, reducing a unit's effectiveness by a level or something, you're just not costing the Russians anywhere near the kind of effect that you're costing them on there. But what I was talking about was who gets to decide. Yeah, gotta try to remember where I was. So who does get to decide is of importance, because the land player probably is less interested in giving his troops up. The question then becomes, does the naval strategy trump that? In some cases, I think it would, but in this one, it is really the land player saying, I need more naval support. So I think either an agreement or the land player himself making the decision is what makes sense. And there's no reason the naval player would refuse it. So I think the land player can offer a draft if the naval player wants it. But I don't think the naval player, who is his own entity trying to win the game on his own. Not necessarily trying to beat the land player, but he certainly does. He would rather see the land player lose and he do well on his map. Okay, so he shouldn't have this choice to pull drafts whenever he likes. And the Russian army starts out kind of weak, but there are a lot of troops that are coming in, although that's not specified in the rules, presumably at some point. And when they start coming close in the winter or whatever, drafts might make sense to put out a decent-sized Russian navy. That also kind of corresponds nicely with the historical, and certainly there were a lot more Russian troops by that point. Okay, so where are we here? There's no campaigns going on, none of this stuff. This is all quarterly stuff up here. No check for victory, really. But I do get to initiate a new campaign, and there's going to be two going on. First, the Swedes are going to choose, and this is what they're precluded from normally, they're going to choose a defensive campaign that allows them to basically move their units around, and they don't have to assign anything to that. It just gives them the right to move. Now, for the Russians, they can't move much of anything except this stack. They have their major leader here, who they can bring up to take command. The Swedes' captain general is not available automatically. He's over here in Sweden. I have to check whether or not he comes in at this point. Yeah, he's checked for at this point. I think he needs a 0 through 2. If I get a good roll, I'll have to check that. But let's see if he comes into play. Yeah, he's coming in. So he's allowed to sail into any old port or something. I'll just put him here to remind me. I also get to check for Swedish reinforcements there. All of this is more or less in place, but I am worried about the campaign phase. The Swedes do not get to pick a campaign based on this guy being on the map, and they don't get to form the army until he's on the map, which, assuming he comes in the post and relieve leaders, comes after the reorganization step, so he's not going to be able to do that either. So the Swedes just are going to be set up to do things next turn. Now, in my solitaire game that I played previously, the Swedes were stuck without their captain general for a long time, so they couldn't do anything except the defensive CP. In particular, what they want to do is this demo command here, which allows them to try to influence the coup. And they ended up, as they did historically, trying to do it in the middle of winter, and it was just horrible. But here they're going to be able to get the jump on that. Now for the Russians, what we do is, maybe this is the right set of charts. No, that's Summer Scala. All right, somewhere I have charts. I'll be back in a bit. I don't have charts. Now I remembered. It's in here in the play thing, so obviously we have to give up where our sequence of play is to find our campaigns. And what the Russians want to do is they want to pick themselves a location. They're going to pick Wilhelmstrad in order, because it's the next place in their location. Now they could kind of bypass this location and go right for Friedrichstraße or whatever, but I would like to take this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit to that. Now, the game said, hey, use 3. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to put an offensive CP at 3. And that drops this down to 2. That's my sort of reserve points there. And then I'll drop this here, which is where I had it before. And that means that I'm committed to taking that. And essentially I have 3 turns to do it, because every turn after this, I'm going to be losing a CP off this action. That's just what the cost of taking an offensive action is. And if I haven't resolved it by that point, my action has failed. Nice. I can, well, that light's dead. One of them green lights. Probably didn't have it screwed in well enough. Okay. So, oh, now it's coming on and off. Maybe it's my plug. Hopefully I'm not going to burn the place down off this. All right, so that's what I'm choosing, and the effect here is basically nothing. It's a point of prestige. There's no peace index effect to it. Next year, different areas start giving me peace index and higher prestige values for Friedrichshain, but I would kind of like to take it, so we'll go with that. Now we page back through here to see what else we do after we selected our campaigns. Now, selecting the campaigns causes a problem. That means we're gonna, and we'll see this in a moment, we're gonna generate less operational points here. And again, most of this, I'm not gonna go through most turns, but I feel like it's important to give an example of what's going on and the kind of thinking involved. Now, I would have been allowed to do some administrative movement, but there really isn't any that I wanted to do. I do have to check my Swedish reinforcements. Now that's in a different book, 4.35 in the Lesser Wrath specific rules, I hope. That'll tell me how I get my Swedish troops. Damn priests, I know half the rules on them. Okay, Swedish. The reinforcement table will give me Swedes during the R&R step. So I got to look for the reinforcement table. And that again is of course going to be in here. And yeah, you spend most of the game flipping through these tables. You get used to where the ones that you need are. Oh, looks like I probably didn't I missed them. So we'll go back through. Yep. This is the fun in the game. And my light is strobing, which is fantastic, I guess. Could be all the way back here. There it is. Great. Okay, so I'm rolling a die. I have no ascendancy, so I don't get a modifier there. And I get a 7, which means I'm not going to get any points. Now, there probably is an opportunity to spend prestige to get more, but I don't want to do that. Prestige is a valuable thing. You don't want to throw it away. Okay. I don't get replacements. Replacements are going to come. I've got to track them somehow. I used these excess counters to kind of indicate them in the flooding and stuff like that really doesn't get used much, to track how many points at various effectiveness levels have been lost. It's not strength points, it's just effectiveness points essentially at various levels. Those all have to be tracked because they'll get them back in percentages. So if I lost a point off a B unit, I get a certain percentage off all the Bs that I lost. I won't get that until the beginning of the next quarter, and obviously I haven't lost anything yet, so that's not an issue. So, post and relieve leaders, I can't do that yet. It looks like I'm pretty much done with everything there. Final supply, there's nothing interesting there. So I'm done with the turn, and very little has happened, right? But I'm going to load this one up. I get some Swedish reinforcements coming in. Those are actually Finns that are going to show up on the board. I don't remember where. I'll look that up. And anything else here? I haven't really been worrying about these. They're at the right place. I think they use the same die roll as I've been using here, so I don't know. Or is that the fact? Yeah, that's the faction. Okay, well, I guess up this goes.